A tired single father sat slumped in a hospital waiting room chair, his head resting awkwardly against a pale wall, still wearing his work uniform and steel-toe boots dusted with dried cement. One arm wrapped protectively around a little girl asleep beside him, while the other rested across his chest where a hospital bracelet caught the cold fluorescent light. He looked like just another exhausted parent trying to survive another impossible night. But when the CEO of the hospital walked past, glanced at the bracelet, and read the name printed on it, the color drained from her face. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, second chances, and family still matter in this world, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Moments Hub for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. Charlotte Hayes was 36 years old and one of the youngest hospital CEOs in the state. She was respected, highly intelligent, and fiercely disciplined. As the leader of Starlight Medical Center, she was known for transforming the hospital's finances, expanding services, and building an image of excellence admired by investors, media outlets, and the local community. Her days were structured with impossible precision. Board meetings, fundraisers, policy reviews, public appearances, financial strategy. Everything in Charlotte's life was organized, efficient, and carefully controlled. Everything except her heart. Years earlier, Charlotte had experienced a loss so devastating it quietly divided her life into before and after. At 28, she had lost her younger brother Noah in a tragic accident. He had been her closest friend, her protector growing up, and the only person who could make her laugh when life became too serious. His death shattered their family. Their parents never recovered emotionally. Charlotte buried herself in ambition. Success became her coping mechanism. Achievement became distraction. And over time, emotional distance became habit. That night, Charlotte was leaving a late executive meeting when she decided to walk through the pediatric wing before heading home. She often did this to remind herself why the institution mattered beyond spreadsheets and strategic planning. The hospital was quieter than usual. Dimmed hallways, soft footsteps, muted monitors, exhausted families curled into uncomfortable chairs. And then she saw him. A man around 34 years old sat sleeping awkwardly in the waiting area outside pediatric oncology. His body was folded uncomfortably into a plastic chair. His dark hair was messy, his beard slightly overgrown, and exhaustion was carved deeply into his face. Beside him, curled beneath a thin hospital blanket, was a little girl around 6 years old asleep against his shoulder. Her tiny hand still held a stuffed rabbit. The sight alone was enough to stir something in Charlotte. But then her eyes dropped to the bracelet. She paused. Stepped closer. Read the name. Ethan Cole. Her breath caught instantly. That name was impossible. Or at least it should have been. Because Ethan Cole was the exact name of the man responsible for saving her younger brother's life, temporarily, years ago during the accident that ultimately took him. Charlotte remembered every detail. Police reports. Emergency records. Witness statements. One name appeared repeatedly. Ethan Cole. A construction worker who had pulled Noah from a vehicle wreck, stayed with him until paramedics arrived, and reportedly donated blood at the hospital before disappearing quietly. The family had spent years trying unsuccessfully to identify and thank him properly. But records were incomplete. Contact information missing. Life moved on. And now, somehow, here he was. Not as a hero being celebrated. Not thriving. Not even remotely comfortable. Just another exhausted single dad asleep in a hospital chair. Charlotte stood frozen. The universe had delivered a moment she never expected. She quietly asked a nurse for information. Not private medical details. Just enough context. What she learned broke her heart. Ethan was 34, a widower, and full-time single father to 6-year-old Ava. Ava had been admitted 2 weeks earlier for a serious blood disorder requiring long-term treatment. Insurance complications had delayed care. Medical bills were mounting rapidly. Ethan had been splitting time between hospital nights and construction shifts during the day just to avoid losing income. He barely slept. Barely ate. Rarely left the building. And despite everything, nurses described him as consistently polite, grateful, and calm. Charlotte looked at him again differently now. This wasn't just a struggling father. This was a man who once helped save her brother and asked for nothing in return. A man now quietly drowning in circumstances no one around him likely understood. Charlotte made a decision. Not as CEO. As a human being. The next morning, she returned personally with coffee, breakfast, and a private room transfer authorization. Ethan was initially confused. Suspicious even. People in power rarely approached struggling families without reason. But Charlotte explained enough for him to understand. Not everything. Not yet. Just gratitude. Days passed. Charlotte began checking on Ava regularly. At first, she told herself it was simple appreciation. But soon, it became something more. She was drawn to the quiet resilience inside that small family. Ava was bright despite her condition. Gentle. Artistic. Endlessly curious. She reminded Charlotte painfully of what softness looked like before life hardens people. Ethan was equally remarkable. He never complained. Never dramatized his circumstances. Never asked for special treatment. He simply loved his daughter with extraordinary consistency. Charlotte watched him braid Ava's hair poorly but enthusiastically. Read stories from worn picture books. Fall asleep sitting upright beside her bed. Smile despite visible exhaustion. Something inside Charlotte softened in ways she hadn't allowed for years. Then came another discovery. Reviewing Ava's billing file privately, Charlotte realized Ethan was dangerously close to withdrawing from treatment planning discussions because he feared he could no longer afford continued care. He had quietly started asking about outpatient alternatives despite medical recommendations. Not because he wanted to. Because desperation was forcing impossible choices. Charlotte knew immediately what she had to do. She arranged for the hospital foundation to fully absorb Ava's treatment costs anonymously under a pediatric emergency assistance program. No publicity. No conditions. No debt. When Ethan was informed, relief visibly overwhelmed him. For the first time in weeks, his shoulders physically lowered as if he could finally breathe. But Charlotte still hadn't told him the full truth. One evening, while Ava slept peacefully, Charlotte sat with Ethan in the family lounge. There, she finally explained. Years ago. Her brother. The accident. The missing hero her family never forgot. Ethan listened quietly, visibly surprised. He barely remembered the event in the way Charlotte had carried it emotionally all these years. To him, it had simply been the obvious thing to do. Someone needed help. So he helped. That was all. That simple answer hit Charlotte harder than almost anything else. She had built an empire around complexity. And here sat a man whose moral clarity was beautifully uncomplicated. Do good when you can. Help when it matters. Move forward quietly. Before we reach the ending, comment below, have you ever helped someone without expecting anything in return? Over the following months, Ava's condition improved steadily. Treatment worked. Energy returned. Her laughter slowly began filling hospital corridors. Ethan no longer looked permanently exhausted. And Charlotte changed in ways even her staff noticed. She became warmer. More present. Less emotionally armored. Hospital policy changes soon followed. Expanded family accommodation support. Emergency financial programs. Parent rest initiatives. Flexible assistance resources. The institution became more humane because one father sleeping in a waiting room reminded its CEO what suffering actually looks like up close. Eventually, Ava was discharged. The day she left, nurses lined the hallway smiling. Ethan carried bags in one hand and Ava's stuffed rabbit in the other while Ava proudly walked beside him. Healthy enough to go home. Charlotte stood near the exit watching. A moment she hadn't realized she needed so deeply. Not closure. Something gentler. Healing. Before stepping outside, Ava turned back and ran toward Charlotte for one final hug. It was small. Unexpected. Completely sincere. And somehow, after years of unresolved grief, it felt like something inside Charlotte finally loosened. Like her brother's memory no longer carried only pain, but purpose. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to Moments Hub for more emotional stories about kindness, hidden connections, and second chances. Sometimes the people who change our lives disappear quietly into the background. And sometimes life brings them back exactly when we need them most.